good morning or good evening. Happy Black History Month. You know it's Black History Month when I put on my black shirt. You know it. You know it's Black History Month. Listen, I hope that you took out time this month to do something special, to learn something about our history, to learn something about our culture. I hope that you took out time this month to recognize Black history. Listen, you know we normally do our production, but we'll be back next year. So we had to give you something before the month is out. And I was thinking about Black inventors. I was thinking about the Black Renaissance. I was thinking about Tulsa. But I thought about education. So this year, we put together a video talking about the importance of education, and especially for us, why it's so important for us to get educated. Listen, I hope you enjoy this. Before we get started, please stand for the Negro National Anthem.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun. Till victory is won.
In 1833, it was illegal for white people to be able to educate or teach black people how to read. And if they were caught, white people were given a fine of $250 to $500, which is probably like a gazillion dollars today. But the thing that disturbs me out of this code the most is the word free. Free black people weren't even allowed to read. Why? What is it about reading that is so remarkably powerful and so remarkably important that even free blacks weren't given this liberty and this opportunity? Because reading empowers, reading liberates, reading educates, and reading emboldens. And we cannot have free-thinking black people roaming this country.
Between 1866 and 1872, approximately 20,000 people are killed, blacks and whites in the South, all because of this perceived threat that education will unlock something.
Well, I grew up in those horrific days of legal racial discrimination. My life was ordered once I walked out of my home by signs and by notions that somehow, no matter what I did, I would never be equal to those who could drink from the Whitewater fountain, go to parks, go to museums. I grew up in the segregated South. I even remember a sign in a park that said, no Jews, no Negroes, no dogs allowed. But inside of my home and in the safety and the warmth of my community, I was told that I could do whatever I set my mind to do. But I had to have a good education. And secondly, I had to work against that horrific system of segregation.
University of Pennsylvania professor Heather A. Williams studied the narratives of slaves who were punished for simply reading.
They talk about having fingers or a thumb cut off.
An unknown number of slaves learned to read in secret schools, hidden in the woods, fearing whippings and amputations.
And so they had this pit in the ground and they would cover it up with bushes.
When slavery ended, segregation became the new law of the South.
The mayor of New Haven, Connecticut, and it says the location of a college of blacks here would be totally ruinous to the city, whose certain effect
will be to lower the town's public morals, to drive from our city its female schools, its throngs of summer visitors. The founding of colleges for educating colored people is unwarrantable and dangerous interference with the internal concerns of the southern states and ought to be discouraged.
It's happening all over the country. This discrimination, this repression, this desire to make sure that black people remain subordinate to whites is something that's national. It's not just Southern at all. And I think that we sometimes
This journey
forget.
began when the federal government enacted the Land Grant College Act of 1862, also called the Morrill Act. The Texas Constitution of 1876 then established the Agricultural and Mechanical College of Texas, later to become Texas A&M University. But the school would only admit white students.
Lincoln saw the need for the creation in this country of a middle-class set of people to make the democracy work. So he created what he called a land-grant college, but some people refer to it as a poor man's college.
And in order for Texas to qualify for that as one of the new states back in the Union, they had to establish a land-grant school, which became A&M. But because they had been one of the states defined as in rebellion, they had to provide separate or equal or included facilities for the newly freed slaves.
The southern states said that they didn't want to go to school with Negroes, so they petitioned the federal government to let them establish 2 universities. And they were supposed to have been separate but equal. So they allowed them to create A&M College, which was for white males only, and it remained from white males from 1876 up until 1963. And they created Prairie View for black males.
Having one college for black and white students under that land grant provision in Texas would never have been accepted.
Thinking about one of my sheroes, Mary McLeod Bethune, who I referenced earlier, the founder of Bethune-Cookman College, now Bethune-Cookman University, co-founder of UNCF, the United Negro College Fund, and of course, the founder 85 years ago of the National Council of Negro Women. There was a day when Dr. Bethune had to tell all of her students to go into they were called dormitories then, and turn out the lights, because she had been told that the Klan would march on her campus that night. And the students obeyed. And she had instructed that when she gave the signal, the lights were to go on because she would be ringing the bell. And that is what happened. And yes, that night the Klan rode on. But there is a long history of racial terror against folk who want to learn.
Despite the violence and intimidation, the shortage of teachers and resources, the black colleges in the South survived. And they began to produce their first graduates. Many of whom were formerly enslaved.
General O. Howard, for whom Howard University is named, he was going around looking at the plight of African Americans, and he ran across students and he asked, "What shall I tell the people up north about the plight of the former slaves?" And the 13-year-old Richard Robert Wright rose and said, "Tell them we're rising."
Some students, however, managed to leap over the hurdles standing in their way. John Chavis, a free black man from North Carolina, was the first African-American college student. Chavis studied as a private student under the president of the College of New Jersey, now known as Princeton University, and continued his studies at Liberty Hall Academy in Virginia. In 1862, Mary Jane Patterson became the first African-American woman to receive a bachelor's degree when she graduated from Oberlin College. Patterson became a teacher and then the first black principal at the Preparatory School for Negroes, now known as Paul Laurence Dunbar High School.
Poet Langston Hughes went to Lincoln University. Zora Neale Hurston studied at Howard, and Clark Atlanta's composer James Weldon Johnson penned, "In the fight against racial segregation,
the civil rights movement as we know it started in the church, but as well in the HBCU.
February 1st, 1960. In an act of nonviolent protest, 4 North Carolina A&T freshmen sat down at a segregated Woolworth lunch counter. They refused to leave.
I never have lived with them, and I'm not going to start now.
Their actions have been called the start of a revolution, inspiring other HBCU students, including a young John Lewis at Fisk University. One of the most revered leaders of the movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was a proud graduate of Atlanta's Morehouse.
Before the Civil War, discrimination against black students led to the founding of the first black colleges in the North, including Wilberforce in Ohio and Lincoln and Cheyney Universities in Pennsylvania.
Cheyney University in Philadelphia is the first historically black college or university. It was founded in 1837 as the Institute of Colored Youth. The founding of that institution transforms educational possibility for African American people.
The era saw huge growth in the number of black colleges and universities, from Howard and Fisk to Hampton and Tuskegee.
Historically black colleges and universities take African Americans who struggle in our failing public schools and turn them into a rigorous scholar with access to a future who has earned the credentials for a college degree.
HBCUs arose as a direct response to racial discrimination, providing opportunities for black students to gain a higher education and enter the middle class. According to the New York Times, HBCUs make up only 3% of the colleges across the country, and yet at least 50% of black doctors and 80% of black judges have graduated from their classes. There remains a significant racial gap in degree attainment, but this gap is shrinking thanks to these black institutions and to increased black enrollment in historically white colleges and universities.
Are spaces where black people are affirmed.
You could be yourself and develop yourself in this rich soil.
It's a space that is an unapologetic black space.
These are places where the
this incredible freedom to explore.
We wanted to better ourselves. We wanted to have an institution where people like us all wanted to be more than the status quo.
The question for African Americans has always been, what is education's purpose? Who controls it? And what is the relationship of education to the broader aspirations of our people?
Pretty sure at all HBCUs, it's a family environment. It's a family-oriented environment.
There's a shared experience at Morehouse that is unique. It's an all-black male institution.
Seeing that people who act like you, who come from similar backgrounds as you, be successful.
That's the brotherhood, that's the sisterhood, that's the family atmosphere that exists at HBCU.
You're no longer the minority. It's family.
Decades, we've enjoyed a solid handful of references to HBCUs and Black Greek life and pop culture.
You could not tell me Hillman College wasn't real when I was a kid. And I am so glad social media didn't exist when I was trying to recreate that drumline scene. Y'all know the one?
Right there, we're going to get some nachos. Because nobody want to see the band. Because you know the band, you know, it's just okay. It's good. They do nice precision, but that's a good time to get on up and go get you a hot dog or something. Because, you know, don't nobody want to see. FAMU, Alabama State. Morehouse, Clark, Tennessee State. Tuskegee, Marshall, Crimson Pipers. Boy, you ain't been.
I have experienced through HBCUs is that failure is not an option. Professors expect excellence out of the students, and that really shows up in the way that they work with the young people in the classroom, the way they work with the young people outside of the classroom, the expectations that are conveyed in orientation.
If you want to find yourself without labels and with the most support you'll probably ever receive, if you're looking for an experience that is uplifting, that will push you, that will light a fire within you, then HBCUs are definitely...
Think about it. Historically, historical Black colleges and universities were created to uplift people of color in a society that would not, forbid them from attending white schools due to racism, prejudice, and discrimination. Now, last I checked, racism, prejudice, discrimination still exists. So wouldn't it be helpful to learn, among other things, from the people that gave us Martin Luther King and W.E.B. Du Bois and other greats how to succeed as a Black person in the real world? Just saying it, not selling it. In addition to the research and academics, they help students to feel comfortable and confident in who they are. At HBCUs, the richness of the Black experience is relished and researched and refined through classes and extracurricular activities that can be hard to come by at other schools.
The only thing that I could possibly add to what Ruth Simmons has so forcibly and very effectively suggested is this, that a partnership really is about reciprocity. Otherwise, again, it's paternalism. And so if there is reciprocity, it does seem to me that those who are coming from PWIs have got to do the kind of inner work, the kind of transformation of their own thinking and learning to entertain and ultimately believe that there are things they can learn from HBCUs. It's not a one-way street where the PWIs, out of the generosity of their souls, decide to come and help the poor HBCUs. Historically Black colleges and universities, I think, can teach PWIs an enormous amount about teaching, about the very process of using respect for where a student is as a platform for taking that student to where she can possibly go. Our HBCUs, I think, have an enormous amount to teach about the experience that is outside of the classroom. And my soror, you and I both know that some of that is in the lives of fraternities and sororities on our campuses. But there's something that happens at an HBCU that I think PWIs could well learn. And that is how a college experience can literally affirm who a student is in the process of preparing her for where she is to go.